Does it matter what Bible translation you use? Are there good and bad translations? Why are there differences in the wordings? How could additions and omissions to the text of the Bible be explained? Is the King James Version the only sacred Bible? A basic question must be asked when we confront different versions of the biblical text. Are we dealing with additions or omissions? Throughout the history of biblical interpretation, there has been a natural tendency by devoted people to explain and expand upon the text. A classic example is John chapter 5, verse 4. That verse does not exist in the earliest biblical manuscripts known to us. Someone at a later time thought that the readers needed to know it, so it was added to the text, probably as a side note in the beginning, but in the later centuries it entered into the text of the gospel. In 1611, by the time of King James Version, many such explanatory additions had already been added to the biblical text, mainly as single words or small phrases, and thus the text had grown in size. By the time of the 19th and 20th century, major archaeological discoveries were made. Dead Sea Scrolls, Codex Sinaiticus, Codex Alexandrinus, and other biblical manuscripts, so we now possess older versions of the biblical texts without the additions or with fewer additions. Now we are able to compare various text versions to see how the text grew and to come closer to the original containing no traditional additions. As followers of Christ, we naturally desire to come as close as possible to the apostolic origins of the first century AD. But some people are rather sticking to the version of 1611. As a theologian, I use many different translations and several languages. As a New Testament scholar, my most important tool is the Greek version of the New Testament. From the scholarly perspective, the most recommended Greek text is Nestle Aland, the 28th edition, since in the footnotes of that edition, and here are the footnotes, here we can check for ourselves all the additions and variations made throughout the century and find exactly in which manuscript they appear for the first time. Thus, in this edition, we can trace changes made throughout time and come close to the original version. Having said that, any Bible is better than no Bible at all. God can reach people through the King James Version and has done so for centuries. We are talking here about many small details of the text and textual variants that usually do not influence theology. How do I choose my Bible translation? First of all, we need to be aware of the fact that any translation is just an interpretation. We all tend to stick to what we grew up with. If it was King James Version, then let it be so. God is speaking through his word transmitted through imperfect human agents. But for a serious scholar, there is no alternative to going back to the original Greek and Hebrew text of the Bible. When I am looking for translations, I use those that take into account the many archaeological discoveries of biblical manuscripts. Usually, good translations are made by a group of expert scholars, since no single person can be proficient in every biblical genre or book. Thus, they are experts for Pentateuch, others for prophets, some others for gospels, even others for epistles, and finally, some for the apocalyptic writings. Only a group of scholars observing all the available archaeological, historical, and literary evidences in collaboration with each other and under the guidance of the Holy Spirit can produce the proper results. For the English language, scholars they recommend the new standard version, but there are also several other serious group efforts that come as close as possible to the original wording of the apostolic faith of the first century AD. What about some modern attempts to paraphrase the text and make the Bible understandable to today's generation? There have indeed been some good efforts to make the Bible relevant to today's people. We should not condemn those using them, since God may not be understandable to some people in old language, not used in everyday communication anymore. Especially young people need to hear the gospel in a language understandable to them. Other people are free to continue sticking to what is dear to them. God can reach people in different ways and has done so throughout the centuries. Thus, the rich diversity of translations is generally speaking an opportunity and not a problem to be solved. Use them, compare them, and go back to original Greek and Hebrew if you can. There are digital tools like Logos or Accordance enabling even lay people today to access and use different language sources. God speaks today, and He does so through the diversity of voices. God can reach different people through different Bibles today. The main thing is to preach the biblical gospel of salvation and not to condemn each other because of the wrong Bible translation. May God bless you in your efforts to understand His word and to apply it in today's world.